My name is Mark Keane. The title of the story is Experimenting with Juliet. I'll read the opening. Juliet had never seen her father so cross. "What are you thinking?" He paced the room. "Why didn't you wear the safety glasses?" "I forgot." She watched him rub his back of his neck, a sure sign he was vexed. "You could have been badly scarred or lost an eye," Beezy said. Her father stopped pacing and plunged his hands deep in the pockets of his brown cords. "How could you be so careless?" She'd been playing in his study, which was more like a chemistry laboratory. Giddy from solvent fumes, she reached for one bottle after another, pouring different chemicals into a beaker, enthralled by the color changes and hissing effervescence. The bubbling intensified until a mini explosion shattered the beaker. "Come with me, sweetie. Let's leave the professor in peace." Beezy took her hand and led her away. "A cup of hot milk is what you need after such a shock." Juliet pulled her hand free and looked back. Her father sat at his desk. He caught her eye and looked away. "Come along." Beezy grabbed her elbow. Juliet had no brothers or sisters. Her mother died in childbirth, and Beezy, an unmarried cousin, came to stay as a live-in nanny cum housekeeper. She had bulging eyes and a gaping mouth, which reminded Juliet of the carp in the window of the fishmonger. "Hot milk, and I'll let you read one of my magazines." Words fascinated Juliet, how they sounded and what they meant. Her father often read out clues from crosswords. She loved it when he made up his own clues. Her favourite was Geggs. Geggs. The answer has 9 letters. Scrambled. She listened carefully as he explained the clue, then squealed her delight. Scrambled Geggs. George Prousnitz, her father's closest friend, was a regular visitor and often joined in the game. "Juliet, here's a clue for you. The answer has 5 letters. Dis or dat duck." He said it in a silly voice. "Any idea?" Juliet shook her head. "Why, it's either." Prousnitz listed words he said you should know if you wanted to complete a crossword. Visceral, psyche, sang-froid, and tawdry. Juliet repeated the words and asked, "What do they mean?" Visceral is emotional, psyche refers to the mind, sang-froid is self-control, and tawdry, well, that's just vulgar. "Sang-froid can never be visceral," she said. Prousnitz ruffled her hair. "Aren't you the precocious girl?" Well, there are 4 characters in the story, and they're introduced in the opening I just read. Juliet, named in the title, is a young girl, aged 7 or 8. She's a precocious child, full of energy and boundless curiosity. Her father is a professor of chemistry at the university. He's a widower, his wife having died in childbirth, leaving Juliet motherless. Beezy is the professor's cousin, who serves as a nanny and housekeeper. The 4th and final character is George Prousnitz, a university colleague of the professor. The relationship between Juliet and her father is central to the story. He is a somewhat stern and austere man. He's ill-equipped to raise and nurture his daughter. She, in turn, wants nothing more than to please him, straining to win his affection and his praise. Beezy is so busy with the household chores that she has little time to give Juliet, and so the child lives in her own world, constantly exploring and questioning. The professor's one passion is his research, and he places scholarship and scientific knowledge above all else. For many years, he's been working on the synthesis of chemicals capable of stimulating the human sensory system. His work has stalled somewhat as he has been unable to test his compounds. One afternoon, he discusses this with Prousnitz. "Where am I to find a suitable subject?" he asks. A chance remark from Prousnitz sets in motion a collaboration between father and daughter that is expressed literally in the title of the story, Experimenting with Juliet. So begins a sequence of tests where the professor has Juliet ingest the chemicals as he records the response in tweaking her sense of taste, smell, and touch before moving on to memory. Perhaps it's a cruel and perverse action for her father, but he has become blind to normal conventions in his pursuit of knowledge. It's an irrationality that undermines this most rational of men. For her part, Juliet cooperates with his experiments, such as her desperate need for affirmation from her father. The experiments proceed over a period of months, but do not go according to plan, and the final outcome is a terrible consequence of Juliet's overriding desire to help her father. Well, I actually didn't set out to do this. In the early versions, the narrative was written from an omniscient point of view. However, the results were really clumsy, and it relied too much on exposition. It just seemed very heavy-handed. Telling the story from Juliet's point of view allowed me to inject more energy and pace into the narrative. She doesn't necessarily know or appreciate the full implications of what is happening around her and to her, but the reader can fill in the details. Now, relating the story from the professor's perspective would have really made for grim reading, and I tried to imbue the text with some humour, however black or bleak. Her father's actions are grotesque, however well-intentional. And now my hope is that seeing events unfold through Juliet's eyes makes for a better reading experience and makes the ending more satisfying. Well, I'm not sure how much I can offer in the way of helpful advices. This is the only time I've ever written about a child, let alone having the story play out from a child's perspective. But in writing the story, I took Juliet's main characteristics as the starting point in trying to capture her voice. And she's very curious and precocious, so I had her questioning what she sees around her and finding wonder in every experience. She's also willful and demanding, which I attempted to express in her disregard for Beezy, the housekeeper, whose compassion she takes for granted. Now, not so her father. He looms large in her life. She wants nothing more than to win his affection. So I kept this devotion for her father and her stubbornness foremost in my mind when writing the story. I attempted to keep the narrative uncluttered when expressing her reactions to avoid veering into any sense of an adult sensibility. I'm not sure how well I managed this. It was definitely a challenge not to impart an adult feel, the writer's involvement to a little girl's response to her very strange circumstances. Well, I can't say that I drew on any existing literature that involved a child as narrator or a central character. I started with the father as the central focus and shifted the direction of the narrative throughout various draft versions. But that said, in terms of intelligent and spirited lead children characters, a Scout in To Kill a Mockingbird certainly comes to mind, though the setting and circumstances are quite different from this story. Juliet may have some features in common with Roald Dahl's Matilda, who's a precocious child forced to face many challenges at home and at school. But from my reading, my personal bias, I would suggest an alternative as an exemplar of a child character in fiction. And that is young Oscar in Gunter Grass's The Tin Drum, which is a masterpiece of dark humour that reveals the cruelty of adults through the lens of a strange boy. That book certainly embraces the grotesque, which is something I tried had to express, however ham-fistedly, in this story. A shout out to all those, I suppose, who read the story. I only hope they enjoy it. And, a shout out to you, Todd and Samjoko, for publishing the story and giving me the opportunity here to say a little about it.